I started acting really right out of high school, and so well over 30 years, and never had a real job. It's just kind of gone from one acting job to another. A lot of Mark Twain, probably 1,500 performances as Mark Twain, and a lot of musicals and some television, some movie work. Not a whole lot, but mostly I like the stage. So that's pretty much been my career. It hasn't been too much from the star aspect. It's just I consider myself more of a working actor. For the one-man show, it's always been Mark Twain. To promote a show like that in a one-man show, it needs to be funny, I think. It needs to be topical. And the great thing about Mark Twain is that what he said 100 and some odd years ago, 150 years ago, still really stands up today and doesn't need to be changed. It's very understandable, and even though it's 150 years old, it's very current. Initially, when I decided to put together the one-man show, I knew it had to be a comedy. I knew it had to be someone who everyone knew. And in America, and it turns out even in Ukraine, everyone knows who Mark Twain is. Everyone has read Mark Twain. So you've got at least a base of an audience for a promoter to sell tickets and so on. So Mark Twain just seemed to fit the bill. And then he was such a great character, I didn't see any great need to create another character. Well, a lot of newspaper reports of the day when Mark Twain would go out and lecture was they would give very detailed descriptions of how he walked, his accent, how he paused as he presented material. And the great thing is also in some of Mark Twain's lecture notes, on the margins, he would write reminders to himself where he wanted to pause, and so you get a nice feeling, and also his voice was described in detail, and so I tried to take the description and put it into my voice. But when I put on the wig, I still know I'm an actor. Some people will ask, well, do you become Mark Twain? And I've always said there's a fine line between being an actor and having a mental illness. But there's a fine line. And the day I walk on stage and think I'm Mark Twain is probably the day I crossed it. So I always try to stay just this side of that line. But it's amazing that over the years, after doing Twain for so many years, I seem to be able to think like him, or at least react like him. And that's actually come in very handy. I've never done question and answers with audiences before, but that's what we did in Ukraine. And it was great. It gave me an opportunity to kind of think and react like Twain might have. I do a lot of, excuse me, I do a lot of voiceover work. A lot of narration and radio commercials and commercial work. And I like that a lot. It's voice acting, so I don't have to worry about the way I look. I can just go into a studio with a microphone and read the script or interpret the script. And so I like that a lot. And every once in a while, it's fun to do a little television or another stage production, although it's tough for me to get back into the swing initially of doing a full-fledged production with 8 or 10 other actors on stage, because doing the one-man show, it kind of spoils me. I'm there all alone. If I forget a line, it doesn't really matter all that much, because nobody's waiting for my line to feed their line. And so I don't know if it's sloppy, that I get a little sloppy, or it's that maybe I've got too much freedom. So when I go into rehearsal for a regular production, it takes me a few days to really get back into the swing of dealing with other people on stage. That's always been a debate in show business, whether or not I can sing. My guess is that no one would ever want to buy a CD of my greatest hits. But if you're watching me on stage singing, I think that the whatever personality I have on stage and my voice work together. It's just not so great, I don't think, recorded. And so the answer is yes, I can sing as long as you're watching me when I do it. And I started out as a dancer, really, 35 years ago. So I'm not as good as I used to be.
Classical dance.
I did a little ballet, but I wasn't tall enough, and I don't think I was disciplined enough. But I was more of a, I guess you'd call it a modern dancer, theatrical dancer. You know, tap dancing, that kind of thing, production numbers. Coming over, the one thing I was concerned with was having an interpreter. I'm very used to doing Mark Twain, and I think I have a timing that I'm certainly comfortable with, and I think it works with the audience. And that it involves pauses, it involves certain emphasis, and so I was concerned when I was told about the interpreter, because I was afraid that the interpreter wouldn't be able to put any theatricality into their interpretation. And we were so lucky. We had this great interpreter who not only was able to change little references that might not translate well into something very understandable, gingerbread into honey cake and so on, but he had his own stage flair. So it was great to be able to, maybe half the audience would laugh when I gave the punchline in English, and it was great to hear the other half of the audience laugh when it was in Ukrainian. And we got very quickly into this pace where it was almost like we had been doing it for years. We just got this great rhythm and timing, and the last few performances I would even play with him a little bit on stage and kind of say things that he might not be expecting, to see how he'd react. And every once in a while I'd go over to him and play with him a little bit for the benefit of the audience. So that turned out to be just a great pleasure. And that was the one thing I was concerned with. I had never done that except once in Canada, and in English and French. And they were sitting in a little booth and evidently just reading it dry. So that was great. And what I was really amazed about were the audiences, were the public. We were welcomed just so affectionately by each one of the audiences. And we did question and answers afterwards, and the audiences had great questions. Not, we didn't really talk about me as an actor. They asked Mark Twain questions, and it gave me the opportunity to answer them. And they weren't foolish questions or silly questions. They were questions that they had read Mark Twain. So I was truly amazed at the amount of exposure that everyone in Ukraine seems to have to Mark Twain. I think what I take back is that there is really no difference between people in Ukraine and people in America. They all seem to laugh at themselves in the same way. They don't take themselves too seriously, which Twain was always a fan of, trying to make sure that no one took themselves too seriously. They had a great tradition of laughter. And as I say, I think really the striking difference is no matter what language it was in, whether it was English or Ukrainian or Russian, the audiences responded to the same material in the same way. And that was just eye-opening to me, because even though I knew Twain was universal, I had no idea that it translated so well.